7 days, one yacht, limited Wi-Fi, no escape, and no idea what I was getting into. This is what it's like to sail the Dalmatian coast with people you've never met. Hi, I'm 𝗍𝗲𝗡, host of Fearless and Fabulous, a channel and a community for women over the age of 50 who plan to make the rest of their life the best of their life. Welcome to Solo in Croatia, a journey by land and sea. This is episode 1, and on this I'm going to take you behind the scenes of a 7-day sailing trip from Split to Dubrovnik, hopping from island to island with total strangers. This trip was part solo escape, part bucket list item, and part reward for achieving a monumental goal of mine, which was to lose nearly 40 pounds in 4 months naturally. And so it was also one of the most fearless and fabulous things I've ever done. So why this trip specifically? This trip was planned around the sailing. I love to sail. I'm not don't trust me with your life in a sailboat. I am certified as a small craft skipper, but even I wouldn't go out on my own, even in a small craft. This was a beautiful yacht, and I had envisioned the feeling that I get when the sails are up and there's beautiful scenery and you're on the water and there's wind in your hair and it's peaceful and you're working with nature. And so I've sailed a few times, but I've never done a multiple day sailing trip. So this was my bucket list item. Now, my son has a girlfriend who has been everywhere. And she said that Croatia is her favorite place ever. And I mean, she's been everywhere. And she said Croatia, hands down, her favorite place. So I looked into sailing trips in Croatia and I found one through a company called Intrepid. And what I liked about them is they have a strong environmental bent, and they also try to do good things for the cultures, for the people in the cultures that they visit. They have lots of trips all around the world. Now, I will say this trip did not meet my bucket list, and I'll explain that in a while, but it was still the most fabulous trip I've ever been on. So we'll talk about what happened. And why did I go by myself? I've always loved solo travel. It makes it more of an adventure to me, and you end up meeting more people than you would if you were in a couple or a group. I did a whole video on why I love solo travel, so I won't belabor it here. But I had a few people say to me, aren't you scared to go by yourself? Or you're so brave to go by yourself? And there's no bravery required. There's nothing hard about traveling by yourself. It makes some things much easier. So on May 28th, I flew from Portland, Oregon to Los Angeles. I had an 8-hour layover in Los Angeles, during which I saw plenty of the airport. Sprinkles, anyone? How about some special effects? Or a robot chair delivering itself? Only in LA, right? From LA, I went to Frankfurt, and that was a multi-hour trip, and I slept a bit on the plane, so that was helpful because I hadn't slept the night before I left at all. I was busy packing and doing things that I needed to do, so it was great to get a little bit of sleep. Now, when I landed in Frankfurt, I decided I needed to get some euro because Croatia has gone to euro as its monetary system, and I didn't have any euro. So I went to the ATM machine, and I was expecting to pay a fee, and I was expecting to pay a little bit of money to get my money out, the exchange rate. But there was also like an 18% markup. And I'm like, what is that about? So I asked a lady who worked at the Frankfurt airport, and she said, oh yeah, when I was in Vietnam, I had to pay a 30% markup. So I am going to list, so you do not get stuck this way. At the end of this video, I'm going to list some travel exchange apps that you can get, like some ATMs, that will keep you from having to pay these exorbitant fees, because I do not want you to have to experience that. Also, I learned a really good lesson. After I tried the ATM, didn't like the markup, walked away. I came back to the ATM. I'm like, okay, I guess I gotta get some money. So I put my debit card in there, and it asked what what language you speak. And I said, you know, English, US. And then it asked what currency. And for some stupid reason, I put US. So I ended up getting $800. So I had 40 $20 bills in US that did me absolutely no good, which put me over the limit for my credit union for the day for withdrawals. So then I had to call my credit union and get them to extend it a little bit so I could get a little bit of euro. So I don't do what I did. Now my time in Split, which is where I flew into, and because the boat dropped us off in Dubrovnik, I flew out of Dubrovnik. But I had about a day and a half in Split, and I had a blast, and I will be happy to tell you all about that in another video. But this video is all about the boat trip. What happened is I flew in, I arrived on May 29th, and then on May 31st, I had to be at the boat at the ACI Marina in Split at 3 p.m. Okay, I knew that. I also knew that I had to be out of my lodgings at 11 a.m. So what I'm going to do with my luggage and, you know, can I drop it off at the boat? No, I ask in advance and you can't do that. For one thing, the boat was probably just traveling. It hadn't arrived at the marina yet. So I decided I would rent a locker. They have luggage storage that you can rent, and I highly recommend it. It was only a few euro, it wasn't bad. And that freed me up from my luggage after I checked out of my lodgings. I got to walk around Split a little bit, and I decided to do a reconnaissance trip to the marina to know, because I wanted to make sure I knew exactly where I was supposed to catch that boat at 3 o'clock. Glad I did that because it was not the marina I thought it was going to be. Google Maps was my friend, and it told me where I had to go. It was past the Split Marina and through this lovely park and then down this road, and it was a 33-minute walk each way. So I got to the marina, figured out where I was supposed to meet the group, and then I had to walk back, of course. I was a little bit early, so I had this lovely carbonara and Chardonnay and looked at the gorgeous boats in the marina, and it was just a great, I felt like, I'm here. Now, when I was at the cafe enjoying my late lunch, a woman approached me and she said, "My name is Sarah. Are you going on this boat trip?" And I said, yes, I was. And she said, "Oh, we'll probably be sharing a cabin." And so you'll be going, what? Well, in the instructions for this trip, they warn you that if there are, depending on the boat and depending on how many passengers there are, you may end up having to share your cabin and a double bed with a same-sex person. And so your options are, you could pay extra for the single supplement, which is a lot of money, and I didn't have it, or you could just suck it up, or you could sleep on the deck if you didn't like that. My plan was I was going to sleep on the deck if I had to share a cabin. If you could see how small these cabins were, you would not want to share a cabin with anybody. So the good news is her name was Sarah. I found out later her full name is Serafina, and she was from Australia, and she was actually doing a 15-day cruise, including our 7 days, and then she was getting on another boat for another 7 days, and then she was going to Turkey after that. So she was having a fabulous adventure herself. So Sarah and I were lucky in that we each got our own room, our own cabins, and our own bathroom. So on that first day, we set sail. Well, we motored out of the marina around 5 p.m. And we went to our first island, which was Brac. There we had dinner, and we got to know one another. We tended to do, on the boat, we did dinners together, mostly, at a restaurant that the skipper recommended, and probably got a little something for it, I don't know. But he introduced us to some great Croatian food, so I won't hold that against him. And it was optional. You did not have to go with the group, but it was nice to just sit and, you know, enjoy our time with the group. I did I was on 𝗏𝗡𝗡. I did 𝗏𝗡𝗡 preparing for this trip. That's 1 meal a day, intermittent fasting. And I continued to pretty much do 𝗏𝗡𝗡 while I was gone, except I did have breakfast out at a cafe a couple of times just because I wanted some good coffee. All we could have on the boat was what was available, which was a tea kettle. And so we would each get, you know, our own instant coffee, which after a while that gets old. While we were in Brac, I did a walk around the town just to see the town. Now, if you remember, this is my, let's see, first day, so it's May 31st, and I had done that long walk to the marina and the long walk back, and I'd also done a little tooling around in Split. And then we're in Brac, and I should have just stayed on the boat and not done anything more because I have a recurring injury that crops up in my left foot if I overdid it, and I definitely overdid it. So the next day, which happened to be my birthday, I could not put any weight on my foot. I didn't want to be the weak link, so I did my best to hobble around. But the good news is that next day, which was June 1st, we stopped at an island called Vis. Now we had the option of doing an island tour in a car, not walking, and learning some history and then having a wine tasting after. And I'm like, that's for me. So I did that instead. I got to see some beautiful vistas, and then we went to this guy's distillery, I guess you would call it, or they make the wine, they package the wine, they bottle the wine, and he let us try 4 different Croatian wines. There was a white wine, a red wine, a rosé, and a one that's like a port, but they call it Prosecco. Now, it's not Prosecco, and the Italians get really mad that the Croatians called it Prosecco. I've heard that from 2 people, so it must be true. But it's called Prosecco, and is nothing like Prosecco. It's more like a port, which is not my favorite. And because it was my birthday, he let me pick out whichever bottle of wine I wanted, and he gifted it to me. So I took the red, and it was delicious. And I forgot to say that Bruno, the skipper, made me stick my foot in a bucket of seawater for quite some time on deck to try to get the swelling down on my foot. And really, you know, don't worry about me, because this is something that happens all the time to me when I overdo it. If I just learn not to overdo it, but I don't seem to learn that lesson. And as long as I stay off it the next day, the day after that, I'm totally fine. Now let's talk about life on board. There's no privacy. You can go to your cabin for privacy, but usually people only do that to sleep. So, you know, there's an upstairs, you know, deck. There's the deck and there's below deck, and, you know, people can sort of separate, but there were 7 of us on the boat, including the skipper. And so someone was always around you, but people kind of like gave each other the space that they needed. You know, if I was reading or writing in my journal or something, people didn't disturb me, and everyone was really nice. There were 2 couples besides Sarah, and Sarah was the gal from Australia. There's me, and then there were 2 couples besides Sarah and me. There was a couple from New Zealand, and they were 77 each. And then there was a couple from Portland, Oregon, and they were in their early 70s. And everyone was great. The 2 couples could not have been more different. The New Zealand couples were madly in love with each other after 55 years of marriage, and they were just lovely to watch. They would do things for each other all the time. She was always taking care of him with making sure he had sunscreen on, and he would make her lunch. And one time he was making her some lamb. She had leftover lamb from dinner, and I said, doesn't she want that heated up? And he goes, oh no, she always likes her lamb cold. And so they just know each other so well, and they just do these things for each other. And then, you know, he served her the food, and she cleaned up, and he said that they have this not rule, but it's just something, a pattern that they've gotten, where he'll do breakfast and lunch, and she'll do dinner, and then whoever cooks, the other one cleans up. Just such a lovely couple. Then there was this couple from Portland, Oregon, which is near where I live, and they were the typical you get on my nerves couple. So they could not have been more different, and it was really interesting to watch the differences between the 2 couples. We did have a couple of mishaps on the boat. So in addition to my foot issue, I was not the first injury. The first one was Sarah, who made the mistake of going below deck when we were motoring and in a little bit of choppy water. We really only one time had some choppy water, but she got very sick. I don't think she actually lost it, but she was not feeling well at all. And after that, she was very, very careful. Now, Sarah's the one that was doing the 15-day trip, another sailing trip after ours, so I did worry about her a lot, but she did okay. The next thing that happened was that the man from the Portland couple, I won't say his name, fell off our boat. So whenever we docked at a port, we would have this plank that would lead from the boat to the port. And he didn't have the best balance. He had some back issues, and that was, an issue for him. And he ended up falling off the boat. And none of us were around. We were all in town at that point. And so there was a boat docked next to us, and there were 3 guys there having their beers and playing poker or whatever, and they fished him out, which is great. And then they said, "I should come over and have a drink with us." And he's like, "No, I'm going to bed." So that was another injury we had. I think that was it, though. I think we did pretty well in terms of, mishaps. So the entire trip to Croatia was a 10 out of 10. However, I do have one complaint, and that was that the sailing trip bucket list I had did not sail. We sailed exactly once, and that was when we were on our way to Hvar, the island of Hvar, and we had about an hour and a half of sailing, actual sailing with no motor, the piece that I was looking for. I quickly put in my iPod and listened to Into the Mystic, because that was my vision. I just could picture myself on the boat with that playing in my ears, and I did get that, so great, but it was not what I signed up for. So I remember Rick Steve saying, if something goes wrong during your vacation, do not let it ruin your vacation. Just go with the flow. So that's what I decided to do. I went with the flow. I didn't make a stink about it. They asked for feedback after the trip, and I did let them know that was hugely disappointing to me, that we didn't sail more, and that they should be more forthcoming about that. They say things like, itinerary may change, and it did. There was one island we didn't go to that was on our original itinerary. And sometimes we'll be under motor. Well, we were under motor 99% of the time, but it was still an adventure and great fun, and I did not let it ruin my vacation. And all that means is I still have a sailing trip on my bucket list. So the only bucket I had that trip was when Bruno stuck my foot in the Adriatic seawater. Now, before I set sail or set motor, I spent a day and a half in Split, and so that's what I'm going to talk about in episode 2. Split is a fantastic city built around a Roman ruin, and there's so much wonderful history in this little town by the sea. I can't wait to share that with you. So please subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss that episode, and that will air next week on the same day as this, so on a Wednesday. And then on Friday, we are doing another episode of the indie publishing series. So if you're interested in writing and publishing your own book, tune in on Friday as well. All right, thanks so much. Stay fearless and fabulous, and I will see you next time.